Hello, welcome to Liberty Wolf. My name is Zach Strong. I created this podcast. This is episode number 19, and today I will be talking about red flag gun confiscation laws. I first want to apologize to my regular listeners and subscribers for not having posted in a number of months now. I actually tried once, but there's an issue, let's just say. I've had a lot of distracting life events recently, some positive, some negative, that have taken me away from this podcast. However, I hope to remedy the situation by coming back a little more regularly. I also encourage you to look at my articles that I have up on my website, theamericancitadel.com. Theamericancitadel.com is my primary website, and I have, I think, 65 articles now up on the website for your viewing pleasure. Now let's get into the podcast today. I'm going to try to keep this short and to the point. There's a lot that could be said, but I think we can say it in just a few words. I will be quoting from basically two sources today. One of them from an article written by Pastor Chuck Baldwin, and another that comes from a book titled The Second Amendment Primer, a Citizen's Guidebook to the History, Sources, and Authorities for the Constitutional Guarantee of the Right to Keep and Bear Arms, written by Les Adams and published by Palladium Press back in 1996. Now, let's start off with a definition. What are red flag gun laws? You may have heard about them. You may have not. If not, it's time to learn because it's becoming a very popular idea. There have been thousands of these red flag gun laws passed all over the country. I guarantee in your state, there's already been one casualty, at least one. Back in Maryland, a man was shot under these red flag gun laws. And so this is a dangerous thing, has a potential to really, really push forward the cause of tyranny in this country. Now, essentially, a red flag gun law, or red flag gun confiscation law, relies on suspicion. If anyone, suspects you of being dangerous to other people, that you might commit an act of violence against someone else. Let's say, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, right? And maybe you're dangerous because you hate the immigrants coming into our country stealing our jobs. Well then, someone who knows you might think this person is dangerous, and they call the police. And the police say, oh, thank you, you suspect they're dangerous, so therefore we're going to go get a piece of paper. It's not even a warrant. It's not a warrant. It does not meet the standards for having a warrant. Anyway, and then we're going to go to this person's house and confiscate their firearms because someone suspected they might be dangerous and they might commit a crime. So it's essentially a pre-crime notion. It's all based on suspicion, whether you suspect someone of having bad intentions towards others, suspect them of being dangerous, right? It's all based on suspicion, not on actual proof, not on actual evidence, not on warrants, nothing. Suspicion only. Now, can you see just right off the bat why this might be a problem? Not even constitutionally speaking, but just in terms of safety. Can you imagine the police showing up at someone's house and this person's committed no crime? They're not even thinking of committing a crime. And suddenly police or a SWAT team or something kicking in their door in the middle of the night or early in the morning or sometime during the day, just unexpectedly, demanding their weapons? I mean, there are a number of people who would pull their weapon because who is this person with guns at my door? Who are these people with guns at my door? Demanding I essentially enslave myself to them, give up my weapons. Obviously, there's already one person who's been shot and killed, who did nothing wrong, who was falsely accused by someone who was angry at him. And under these red flag gun confiscation laws, they went to the door, he defended himself. He said, "No, I'm not turning in my guns." They said, "Yes, you are." He said, "No, I've never committed a crime. I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't intend to commit a crime." And so they try to disarm him, take away his right, his God-given, constitutionally guaranteed right to keep that firearm. He tried to defend himself. They shot him dead. Okay, so this is a very, very dangerous situation. And then constitutionally speaking, you have the Fourth and Fifth Amendments that talk about due process. Red flag confiscation laws do away with due process. There is no due process. There's no judge signing a warrant because there was burden of proof presented to him. Nothing like that. There's no crime that's been committed. It's pure suspicion. So now let's go ahead and open up Chuck Baldwin's his open letter. He wrote this open letter to Senators Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio, and others. This is back in March 21st, 2019. I really highly recommend this open letter. You can find it on Chuck Baldwin's website, chuckbaldwinlive.com. You can also find a version of him delivering this in person on YouTube. And you can find it elsewhere. He took out a full-page ad so he could publish this publicly because it's so important. Now, here are a couple things he said. He said, quote, "Red flag gun confiscation laws violate every principle of liberty upon which our country was founded. There is no due process associated with red flag laws. A judge's order to seize the firearms from an American citizen who has not been accused of a crime, charged with a crime, convicted of a crime, or who has never even threatened to commit a crime, based on the accusation of a single individual is anything but due process. Our accuser could be a disgruntled employee, a bitter ex-spouse or relative, a vengeful neighbor, an anti-gun liberal, or even an anti-gun policeman. By definition, red flag laws use mere suspicion of what one might do as justification to seize a person's firearms. Tactics such as these have been used in virtually every despotic regime of history. In the name of protecting society, the rights and liberties of individuals were denied. Eventually, these repressive governments included political and religious persuasion as triggering red flag laws, as triggering red flags, which led to their disarmament. All in the name of public safety, of course." Close quote. I will leave the rest for you to look up and read yourself. It's a really fantastic open letter by Chuck Baldwin, and everyone should read it. And he hits the nail on the head right there, that there is no due process involved. It's based on mere suspicion. It violates every sense of justice, every formal written law and constitutional guarantee we have. It's just an abominable, dastardly concept. It's tyranny. Now, it might be shocking to some quote-unquote conservatives that even Donald Trump, yes, President Trump, supports red flag gun confiscation laws. I wrote about this a year ago. I don't believe I used the term red flag at the time, though I may have. But I remember I watched a video, Donald Trump speaking, and he said that when there's someone suspected of, for example, being mentally ill or unstable or a danger to society, you should take the firearms first, then go to court. So in other words, you don't get in Donald Trump's mind, you shouldn't get a warrant, you shouldn't have due process, you should just go take the firearms first if you suspect someone of being dangerous, and then later bother with all that legal mumbo jumbo. Right, this is Donald Trump, the so-called defender of liberty, right? The savior of the Republican Party and conservatism. He's not, though. I'm sorry. No, I think he's been the best president in my lifetime. That's not saying a whole lot against contenders like Barack Obama and George W. Bush and Bill Clinton. But even Donald Trump is abysmal on Second Amendment issues. I mean, he illegally, unilaterally, arbitrarily, unconstitutionally banned bump stocks. I believe that ban went into effect earlier this year. A president can't do that, yet he did it. And he has supported these red flag gun laws. Why? Based on mere suspicion that someone might be dangerous, so therefore you have to act against them. Yeah, the Constitution be damned, right? Who cares about your oath to the Constitution when there's mere suspicion involved? To go further, though, President Trump has suggested that, you know what, maybe we should extend background checks, make them more thorough and extensive. That's one of the big things that gun grabbers want to do. They want to make you jump through so many hoops it deters you from ever getting a gun. For example, they want to make long waiting periods for guns. So when you go, you have to go through this background check and this long waiting period and all that sort of stuff. They claim this will make it safer, as if people are running out grabbing guns and then going committing crime 3 seconds later. That's not how it works. Sorry. Um, and so we have to be very careful. These gun laws are coming at us from every angle, from the leftists, from Donald Trump, from the White House, from the courts, from your state government. Everywhere you look, you're finding this anti-gun, anti-Second Amendment, anti-Constitution, anti-liberty mentality rearing its dirty, ugly head. It's a very dangerous situation. Now, I want to turn to this book by Les Adams, The Second Amendment Primer, and I want to quote some quotes from constitutional scholars, from some of the ratifying conventions in the early days of our republic, and from some founding fathers. Let's see. These quotes talk about the purpose of the Second Amendment and the necessity to free men of having arms in their possession. So let's start with a quote here this is from Connecticut in 1787. This town meeting, they got together and they passed some resolutions. Here's one of the things they said, quote, "All will agree that the people should retain so much power that if ever venality and corruption should prevail in our public councils, and government should be perverted and not answer the end of its institution, that is, the well-being of society and the good of the whole, in that case the people may resume their rights and put an end to the wantonness of power. In whatever government the people neglect to retain so much power in their hands as to be a check to their rulers, depravity and the love of power is so prevalent in the human mind, even of the best of men, that tyranny and cruelty will inevitably take place." Close quote. So having arms is just in the very first instance, the very first reason, the ultimate reason, I guess, is to retain one's freedom, for people to retain their freedom, is to be a check on tyranny. You might not want to do that, Mr. Tyrant, because we have guns and we're going to blow your brains out if you try to take our rights and make us slaves. Right? It's a very good deterrent, because most evil people don't want to die. Most good people don't want to die either, right? People don't want to die. And so if you have guns, people are going to be less likely to screw with you. Maybe that's not the most legal of terms, the best way to put that, but let's just be blunt. I mean, guns are a deterrent against crime, criminality, tyranny, and tyrants. But this little town meeting in Connecticut, they're not the only ones to agree. You have Joseph Story, one of the greatest legal minds in our nation's history. Joseph Story said this, referring to the Second Amendment. He said, "The importance of this article will scarcely be doubted by any persons who have duly reflected upon the subject. The militia is the natural defense of a free country. The right of the citizens to keep and bear arms has justly been considered as the palladium, or safeguard, of the liberties of a republic, since it offers a strong moral check against the usurpation and arbitrary power of rulers, and will generally, even if these are successful in the first instance, enable the people to resist and triumph over them." Close quote. So again, arms are a good check on despotism and arbitrary power and usurpation. Okay, so and even if our representatives in government do manage to usurp power, which they have, then guns are the final resort to get our rights back, to reverse the usurpations. That's why it's so critical. Anyone who says we should take away guns, that person, automatically that person does not have uh, in their mind, good intentions to keep safe your freedom. They want to reduce you to slavery. This is by default, because free people have guns, or free people have arms. Slaves do not. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. This same theme will kind of come up in some of the quotes I'm going to read. I'm going to read some more, just randomly go through this book and pick some quotes. Tench Coxe, for example, he said that if tyranny should ever threaten us, then the Friends of Liberty would use, quote, those arms which Providence has put into their hands, close quote, to rectify the matter. All right, so to Tench Coxe, God, Providence, supernatural power, the creator, nature's God, whatever word you want to use, deity, has given us arms. And as, again, in the ultimate equation, the reason for that is to be able to push back against tyranny, to repel the invasions of people who want to enslave us. This is just a common sense thing. St. George Tucker, one of the great constitutional scholars, again, in our history, he said, speaking of the Second Amendment, this amendment may be seen as the true palladium. Again, palladium means safeguard. The true palladium of liberty. The right of self-defense is the first law of nature. In most governments, it has been the study of rulers to confine this right within the narrowest limits possible. And he says that when people have restricted this right, then they create standing armies and then they tyrannize the people. But we should always keep in mind that the right of self-defense is the first law of nature. And we could do this whole long discourse on that, but just keep that in mind. It's the first law of nature. Now, Henry St. George Tucker also concurred and said that the right to keep and bear arms is a right that is particularly enjoyed by every citizen. And went on and said that one of the reasons for that is that, quote, it furnishes the means of resisting as a freeman ought the inroads of usurpation. Again, you see this theme of you have guns to fight against corrupt government, to preserve your liberty, retain your rights. Noah Webster said, quote, the supreme power in America cannot enforce unjust laws by the sword, because the whole body of the people are armed and constitute a force superior to any bands of regular troops that can be, or on any pretense, raised in the United States. So again, even Noah Webster here says the ultimate reason people have firearms is to prevent tyranny from growing in this country and from usurping power and authority over us. Thank God the people are armed. Because otherwise, evil people always tend to gravitate towards government because government puts power in their hands and evil people love power. So therefore, arms are a great deterrent to these power-hungry lunatics who get into government. Okay, let's flip a couple pages, and here's one by Alexander Hamilton. He said that the people should be properly armed and equipped. And he said that even if we do set up a standing army, which the Founding Fathers were almost all of them were against standing armies, so that even, quote, that army can never be formidable to the liberties of the people, while there is a large body of citizens, little, if at all, inferior to them in discipline and the use of arms, who stand ready to defend their rights and those of their fellow citizens. Yet again, I don't know how many times I have to say this, again and again, and again and again. The ultimate reason that free people have firearms is to prevent the usurpation of their freedom and the growth of tyranny in their government and in their society. Flipping back a couple more pages, we find this quote from Patrick Henry. He said, the militia, sir, is our ultimate safety. We can have no security without it. The great object is that every man be armed. Everyone who is able may have a gun. So a lot of people say that, look, in our founding fathers only thought that you could have a gun in connection with the militia. Only if you belong to a militia, then you could have a gun. Or the only purpose of having a firearm is so that you could serve in a militia, and that they've perverted the militia concept to mean National Guard. But this was not the case. Every man who is able may have a gun, says Patrick Henry. But if that wasn't clear enough, here's John Adams. Quote, arms in the hands of citizens may be used at individual discretion, in private self-defense. But what did John Adams know, right? I mean, who was he? Right? Who was John Adams? Oh, just one of the guys who got us into the War for Independence, one of the greatest voices for liberty that's ever lived, second president of the United States, first vice president of the United States. You can just go down the list. Helped write the Constitution of Massachusetts, along with one of my forefathers, Caleb Strong. I'm going to quote that again because it's so important. Arms in the hands of citizens may be used at individual discretion in private self-defense. Close quote. John Adams. Samuel Adams also agreed and said that the Constitution will be never construed to infringe the just liberty of the press or the rights of conscience, or to prevent the people of the United States who are peaceable citizens from keeping their own arms. Their own arms. Whose own arms? The individual citizens of the United States. Their own arms. Not just people who belong to a militia, but the individual citizens. As long as they're peaceable, that is, as long as they're not infringing on the rights of other people, then they may have arms. It is their right. Here's one from New Hampshire, from the ratifying convention there in 1788. They said, Congress shall never disarm any citizen unless such as are or have been in actual rebellion. Again, it takes an actual crime, actual rebellion, to justify taking away guns from a person. Not suspicion, like red flag gun laws, not suspicion, but actual crime, and then only after due process. All right. Then you have the Pennsylvania Convention in 1787. They said that the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and their own state, or the United States, or for the purpose of killing game, and no law shall be passed for disarming the people or any of them, unless for crimes committed or real danger of public injury from individuals. So unless crimes are committed or real legitimate danger, such as I send a letter to my governor saying I'm going to kill you tomorrow, right? That would be a real danger. That's an actual threat. You can't just sit back idly when someone makes a legitimate threat and says, I'm going to kill such and such a person. That has to be taken seriously. And not just a person in government, but any person. If I say I'm going to kill my neighbor, then that has to be taken very, very seriously as well. Right? That is an actual danger. But whether it's something like that, unless it's something like that, or a real crime or a real rebellion, then no law shall be passed for disarming the people. Period. No law ever shall be passed for disarming the people. No law, no law, no law. No red flag gun laws. No ludicrous background checks. No Trump-style take the firearms first and go to court later laws. No law shall be passed. That's why the Second Amendment is worded the way it is. It's a thou shalt not commandment to government. You shall not infringe upon our Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. This right comes from God. If you don't believe in God, well, then it comes from your nature. It's inborn into you. You don't get that right from government. You don't get the right from a majority of people. You don't get the right from the community. You don't get the right from the Constitution, as inspired and wonderful and sacred as I hold that document to be. No, it does not come from the Second Amendment. And it can never be taken from us. Now, just a couple more quotes here. I think that should suffice. One from Thomas Jefferson. This is a famous one, but I think it bears repeating. He said, "A strong body makes a strong mind. As to the species of exercise, I advise the gun. While this gives moderate exercise to the body, it gives boldness, enterprise, and independence to the mind. Games played with the ball, and others of that nature, are too violent for the body, and stamp no character on the mind. Let your gun, therefore, be the constant companion of your walks." Let your gun be the constant companion of your walks. That's Thomas Jefferson speaking. He actually loved to shoot foxes and hunt foxes, if you didn't know that. He was a fox hunter. All our founding fathers, they loved guns. They had guns. They carried guns. They walked with guns. They rode horses. They had guns. They had guns in their homes. They belonged to the militia. They shot the British when the British tried to come take their guns. They had a gun culture, and it was a great, wonderful thing. They produced the freest, most prosperous, wealthiest, happiest, most incredible, most powerful, most influential society in world history. This unique American society, this American exceptionalism grew out of the gun culture, so to speak, of the founding fathers. Even more, it was a freedom culture, and indispensable to that freedom culture was the gun. And I've made this point before in my writings that it's really not about guns, it's about self-defense. Because before guns were invented, did people have a right to defend themselves? Yeah, of course they did. They used clubs or swords or a bow and arrows or whatever it was, nunchucks, right? Whatever it was. Before guns invented, they still had the same exact identical right to defend themselves. The means of self-defense is wholly irrelevant. And so after guns fall out of use one day, let's say 500 years in the future, let's say we all have laser guns or laser weapons or something, does that mean the Second Amendment doesn't apply? Nope. It still applies because you still have a God-given right to self-defense. So the means does not matter. I personally am in favor of anyone being able to own a bazooka, landmines, flamethrowers. I honestly don't think it matters. I don't care if Jim Bob down the street thinks he needs a Sherman tank to defend his front yard. I don't care. Really, I don't. I once watched a talk, a press conference by a sheriff. Where was he? I think he was in Kentucky, if I recall correctly, who said the same thing. He said, if you believe you need a machine gun to defend your home, who am I to say that you don't? And I would to God that more people could understand that. People think, you don't need a 30-round magazine. Who are you to say I don't need a 30-round magazine for my assault rifle? Who are you to say I don't need a sniper rifle? Who are you to say I don't need a 50 cal, pop it out of my window? Who are you to say I can't or shouldn't have landmines? Who the hell are you to say that I can't have any gun or means of self-defense that I want to? Self-defense is the first liberty, really. It's the first law of nature, right? That's the quote we just read earlier. It's the first law of nature, defending our other rights, because our other rights mean nothing. They mean nothing if you can't defend them. Your property means nothing. Your right to free speech doesn't mean anything. Your family can't be defended without arms in your hand. Self-defense is so important, folks. And this kind of leads us to the last couple quotes I have here. Thomas Paine got a little philosophical when he said this, quote, "The peaceable part of mankind will be continually overrun by the vile and abandoned, while they neglect the means of self-defense. The supposed quietude of a good man allures the ruffian, while on the other hand arms, like laws, discourage and keep the invader and the plunderer in awe, and preserve order in the world as well as property. The balance of power is the scale of peace. The same balance would be preserved were all the world destitute of arms, for all would be alike. But since some will not, and others dare not lay them aside, horrid mischief would ensue, were one half of the world deprived of the use of them. The weak will become prey to the strong." Close quote. How true is that? The weak are prey to the strong. Think about it. Most criminals attack people based on opportunity. They see a weakness, they go for it. If they don't see a weakness, usually they're cowards and they don't try to attack the person or try to rob their house. That's why they wait until someone leaves their house or find a house that doesn't have a dog in front of it. They're cowards, and so they're opportunistic. You take that opportunity away by being strong. I didn't think of including this quote, but off the top of my head, George Washington said the same thing about our nation. He said the most effectual means of promoting peace is through strength, is by showing others that we do have power and strength, and that we're ready to beat you into the ground if you try to come for us. If you come after our liberties and our rights and our people, then we're going to beat you into the ground. And so, this brings me to my last let's see, one or two quotes. Let me switch over here and find this. James Burr said this: "The possession of arms is the distinction between a freeman and a slave. He who has nothing, and who himself belongs to another, must be defended by him whose property he is, and needs no arms. But he who thinks he is his own master, and has what he can call his own, ought to have arms to defend himself and what he possesses, else he lives precariously and at discretion." That's fantastic. If you are a slave, you don't need to be defended because your master defends you. But if you're the master, if you're the freeman, if you are a free individual, then you need those weapons to defend yourself. This is perhaps why Thomas Jefferson said, "No freeman shall ever be debarred the use of arms." You could put a giant period behind that. No freeman shall ever be debarred the use of arms. Never. Not unless they commit a crime that justifies it. Final quote I will read is from George Mason. He said, "To disarm the people is the best and most effectual way to enslave them." If you want to enslave people, take away their means of self-defense. If you want to reduce people to abject slavery, like in communist Russia, in communist China, in communist North Korea, communist Venezuela, then you take away their firearms. You take away their means of self-defense. You make it illegal to defend themselves and their families and their rights. See, only tyrants fear arms in the hands of people. So when you see all these leftist candidates out there, or even a Donald Trump, trying to do away with your right to defend yourself, to trying to do away with due process, and trying to pass laws like red flag gun confiscation laws that allow police, jackbooted thug, bootlicking police who just follow orders, then you know that person is promoting tyranny and has bad intentions. They have designs on your liberty. Resist those people. Resist them, resist them, resist them. It's time to hoist the flag that says, "Don't tread on me." Time to repeat the old Spartan slogan, Molan Labe, "Come and take it." Come take. If you think you can take my arms and make me a slave, come try. I just posted an article on my website, the American Citadel, called "What I See Coming," and I predict civil war in this country. I think it's inevitable at this point. Now, because we've lost so much freedom, and liberty is only won back through bloodshed. That's historically true. There's never been a case of people winning freedom, earning freedom, establishing freedom without bloodshed. It's like an eternal law of the universe. And so since we've lost a lot of our liberty, we're never going to get it back without some amount of bloodshed. Now that amount is what's the key. We can limit the amount and limit the suffering if we act now, if we rally people to our standard, if we get enough people on our side. However, there's still going to be an uphill battle because the powers that be, the elitists, the establishment, these Marxists, they have a lot of power and they've been able to dupe people into even giving up their own means of self-defense. So we have to be very careful how we proceed here, but we have to also not relinquish our rights. Don't give up your rights. Don't give up your right of self-defense if you value any of your other freedoms and liberties. Because the red flag that will be going up, if you do that, will be the communist flag as it soars over this country. Stand firm. Remember your right to defend yourself, your liberty, your family, your country, your republic, the Constitution. That comes from God Almighty. He gave you that right. It is not a privilege that comes from government. It is not a privilege that can be taken away by the majority. It is not a privilege that can be voted away. It comes from God and only God. And you're responsible to Him, not the president, not your governor, not your congressman, for that right. Thank God for the American gun order, because He is the only thing holding back the tide of global tyranny. I sign off as I always do, but this time I hope it means a little bit more. Sic Semper Tyrannis, long live liberty.